Hey guys, and welcome everybody. I'm Matt from MTG Gaming Bob. Today we've got a bit of a deck tech. Currently, I'm joined into one of the Jake and Joel Are Magic's Precon League. Basically, you can pick any commander, any legendary creature from any of the precons from Avengers of Zendikar until present. So, I was initially going to play Osgir, because Osgir is a deck that I play automatic, and it's very, very strong right out of the box, right out of the precon. Probably one of the strongest. And then I decided that I didn't want to do that last minute because it's Boros, and I played Boros last league, and I don't want to play, another league of the same thing. So I decided to last minute pivot to Sefris of the Hidden Ways. This is a deck that was initially created by my good buddy, Good Job Dino. So I actually just I printed up and piloted his right from the get-go. And so we'll go through the deck. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the video. Subscribe to the channel. Comment on the video. Like it. All that kind of fun stuff. So we'll go through each card and why I picked it, or why my buddy picked it mainly. And then we have an update to the video. I'll just probably do it all in one video, maybe a separate video. I don't know. What do you guys like? I like the updates because they're fun little, they're shorter videos basically is what I'm trying to say. So we'll probably just do one video of the deck tech, next video of the update. All right, so anyways, let's get into it. Sefris of the Hidden Ways. Esper in color, which is white, blue, black. 2/3, human wizard. Whenever one or more creatures are put into the graveyard, creature cards. Very specific, by the way. Creature cards. Tokens don't count. Very annoying. Anyways, when they're put into the graveyard from anywhere, venture into the dungeon. This ability triggers only once per turn. Okay. Venture into some dungeons. And create undead. Whenever you complete a dungeon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Pretty good. Reanimator on a stick. Just get through some dungeons. The shortest dungeon you can go through is technically 3 rooms, but that one bigger room, I don't ever want to use it. I mean, there might be a situation to use it, but man, it's pretty brutal. So if you really got to cruise through, maybe it's worth it. But either way, this is the commander. All right, next card, Liliana's Death Majesty. 5 mana for a 5 loyalty planeswalker right off the rip. Create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. You put 2 cards from your graveyard or your library into your graveyard. This is very good because it self-mills, which fills your graveyard with creatures to then reanimate with Sefris. Not only does it do that, but it also can trigger Sefris' ability on your turn. So if you mill a creature, it triggers the venture into the dungeon value. -3, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is also a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Reanimator on a planeswalker. Fantastic. See the theme here? Reanimation, a little bit. -7, destroy all non-zombie creatures. Pretty good. Removal. -7 is not too hard when it starts off at 5 already, and the +1, I mean, within a couple turns, you can get it to go off. And if you're reanimating stuff, well, you're not, I mean, realistically, the board wipe is just kind of like a last-minute thing if you really need to. Probably won't ever go. I had the ability to go off, but, didn't use it. I just reanimated a bunch. Archfiend of Ifnir. Flying 5/4, and it has cycling on it, which is a very good thing to have when Sefris doesn't care how the card gets there. Sefris only cares about a creature card hitting the graveyard. That includes cycling, milling, discarding, however you want to do it, however you get it to the graveyard. I mean, if a creature dies on the battlefield, boom, trigger. He triggers a lot of different ways, not from tokens. Very annoying. Anyways, whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. Opponents, multiple, plural. Very nice to have, being able to just get rid of many, many creatures by doing what the deck already wants to do. It already wants to cycle, it already wants to discard, to fill up that graveyard, to then trigger Sefris, to then reanimate. So, it's pretty good. Archon of Cruelty is a monster. 8 mana, 6/6 flyer. Sounds like a lot, but when we're reanimating it, who cares? But whenever Arcane of Cruelty enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, discards a card, and loses 3 life. You draw a card and you gain 3 life. There's just so many things. It's just fantastic. And being able to reanimate it with Priest of Fel rights and just get the tons of value. Reanimating in general obviously gets tons of value. Just Arcane of Cruelty is a monster. Copying Archon of Cruelty is really, really strong because you're in blue, so you can create copies of them. I've done it. It's brutal. Very good card. Archon of Cruelty, he's a monster. Ashen Rider, another one of those monstrous cards where if it gets... it can get out of hand pretty quickly. The mana cost seems like it's pretty crazy. You know, 8 mana for a 5/5 flyer. Sounds like a lot. Whenever Ashen Rider enters the battlefield or dies, exile target permanent. Very good removal. And again, when you're ditching, you know, draw ditch or discard to, you know, whatever, or mill it, however you want to get it to the graveyard, reanimating it becomes a lot cheaper in black-white. So the mana cost, I have hard cast it once, so it's not too out of the question, you know, and especially in a commander when it goes pretty late game when everybody's playing a budget. Games go like 2 to 3 hours sometimes. Oof, it's long, but it's still fun. But obviously Ashen, super fun, super good card. Baleful Strix, blue-black for a 1/1 flying death touch that whenever it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. This is mainly in for kind of reoccurring drawing and stuff like that. It's a good blocker. It can attack, but it's mainly there for being a good blocker and just being there to draw cards. It has some reoccurrence value with certain cards like Revlark, and we'll go through them. But yeah, pretty decent card. Not a staple by any means, but still good. Burnished Heart, 3 mana, 2/2. Pay 3 mana and you get to sacrifice Burnished Heart to look through your library for 2 basic land cards. They come into battlefield tapped. This is mainly just kind of a really good budget option to go through your deck and kind of get, you know, fix your mana if you need to. It's colorless. This deck doesn't run a ton of mana rocks or anything like that, so you need something. And this has some reoccurrence with some other cards, so it's pretty good. Cataclysm Gearhulk. He's a board wipe on a stick. Kind of. So it's 5 mana for a 4/5 with Vigilance. When he enters the battlefield, each player chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control. You sacrifice the rest. That's pretty good. I mean, you do get, everybody gets to keep their best thing, but it can cause a lot of problems, especially when you're reoccurring it a lot. So pretty good value there. Cathar Commando. He's got pretty good tech in this deck for things like this. Little things you really don't think about, but... So it's a creature that has... It's 2 mana, 3/1, has flash. Sacrifice, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So what's really good about this is you can flash this in on somebody else's turn, sack it to destroy an artifact or enchantment that's a problem, and then you trigger Sefris on somebody else's turn. There's a lot of different ways to try to make sure you get the most value going through the dungeons as many times as possible with this deck. And that's kind of what this deck is all about. Going through the dungeon, completing the dungeon, getting value. Champion of Wits. When it enters the battlefield, you may draw cards equal to its power. If you do, discard 2 cards. It's 3 mana for a 2/1, so you're going to draw 2, discard 2. Now, this isn't a bad thing because you want to be able to draw ditch. You want to ditch the powerful creatures that you want to reanimate. So the ones that cost a lot, you ditch those. Hopefully you draw into some lands or whatever, or reanimate spells, and boom, there you go. And then, of course, the Eternalize, you get it back as a 4/4 zombie. You'll get to draw 4, and then have to only ditch 2. Not bad. Cloudblazer. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards, you gain 2 life. It's a 2/2 flyer for 5. Again, decent Reanimator target, just being able to draw cards, gain life. Value. Doomed Necromancer. Reanimator on a stick. 3 mana for a 2/2, you sack it, and you reanimate something from the graveyard to the battlefield. Pretty good. Dream Trawler is a monster in the deck. Very, very good. It's got lifelink. It gets pluses pretty easily. It's a flyer. Flying wins games. Lifelink wins games. Drawing cards wins games. This just says it wins the game. The one time I did get to play it, it got a ton of value. And the fact that it has discard and you get hexproof until end of turn, pretty good. So, yeah. So anyways, it is 6 mana. And it's a 3/5 flying lifelinker. Whenever you draw a card, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So on your turn, it's already a 4/5. And then in a deck where you're doing a lot of draw ditch, it gets a much more power pretty consistently. And whenever you attack, you draw a card. So now it's a 5/5. And then, you, like I said, discard a card and it gets hexproof. Really good card. Eternal Dragon. 7 mana for a 5/5 flyer. Then you can pay 5 mana, return Eternal Dragon from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your upkeep. Then it has plane cycling. I will say, I don't like this card. I've played it a couple times, I plain cycled it, and I've never wanted to pay that 5 mana cost. That 5 mana cost only during your upkeep is so limiting. I can't pay that 5. There's so many other things I'd rather do. But it's the first thing that left the deck the second week, or the second week when you can change cards. But it does trigger Sefris, and you can reanimate it, and you can bring it back if you want to then get more planes. I mean, you can do this, but I don't like it. But it wasn't there. And it, like I said, the plane cycling was nice. Get land and then trigger Sefris. So, like I said, more about cycling and draw ditch in this kind of first iteration. Hostage Taker, 4 mana for a 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, exile another target creature or artifact until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. You may spend mana as though it were any mana type to cast that spell. The first week, I got to exile a Revenant reagent. It's like a 6 mana cost, 6/6 flying vampire that whenever your creatures deal damage to a player, they get that many 1/1 counters. Freaking monster. Actually, I was able to exile it and then play it like 2 turns later, so he's pretty good. But when you're able to like exile it and play the thing, and then you could like sacrifice it to something and then bounce it, reanimate it back, and keep kind of doing that, kind of like, exile stuff. You can exile tokens that just kills them. So, a lot of value here for 4 mana. Karmic Guide, pretty good. It's a Reanimator on a stick that has Echo that you don't have to pay. And the nice thing about that is that not paying it is like a free trigger for Sefris. It gets it back into the battlefield, and then it gives you another thing to reanimate to then get something else to, see? You're just triggering. You're just kind of cycling through the dungeons as much as possible. It's a 5 mana, flying, protection from black, 2/2, has Echo. If you don't pay it at the beginning of next upkeep, you have to sacrifice it, which is good. Probably never pay it, unless you need the flying protection from black. Not a bad creature to have around, by the way. But yeah, reanimates when it comes into the battlefield. Merfolk Looter, 2 mana for a 1/1, draw ditch. Like I said, you can draw ditch on somebody else's turn, draw a card, ditch a creature, trigger Sefris, go through the dungeon. So this is what this is all about. It's all about adventuring. Mole Drifter, again, having a thing that you can play, it then sacrifice right away to trigger Sefris. You're drawing cards. You can do, you see the theme here, drawing cards, winning the game. Nadar, Selfless Paladin, pretty good creature, 3 mana for a 3/3. Vigilance is already okay. But then when you add, whenever he enters the battlefield or attack, you venture into the dungeon. So just playing him right off the rip, he ventures. And then when there's 3 other people that you're fighting against, there's a good chance he'll be able to attack someone. So you get venture triggers from that. And then you get your creatures 1/1 as long as you've completed a dungeon. You're going to complete a dungeon almost guaranteed. So, the deck's designed to do that. So he's kind of an anthem, Necrotic Sliver, this is mainly just having a sack outlet on itself, and it's a 3 mana 2/2, so it can be returned by Revelark or other reanimate spells, but Revelark cares about your power, I believe, being less than 2. So Necrotic Sliver, goes along that. So it's 3 mana for a 2/2. All slivers have pay 3 mana, sacrifice this creature, destroy target permanent. It's removal on a stick, which will then trigger Sefris, which will venture through the dungeon or reanimate. Noxious Gearhawk, removal on a stick. So 6 mana for a 5/4, Menace. When he enters the battlefield, you may destroy another target creature. If a creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to its toughness. It's okay. He's fine. Obsessive Stitcher. This is a really good card to have in here. 3 mana for no 3. Draw a card, ditch a card. So draw ditch. Nice to have. And then it also is a Reanimator on a stick. So draw ditch and a Reanimator. Pretty nice flexibility there for only 3 mana. Orc Lore Mage. 4 mana for a 3/3, and when you tap him, search your library for a card. Any card. Put it into the graveyard, then shuffle. If it's an instant or sorcery card, put a 1/1 counter on Orc Lore Mage. You're almost never going to do that, unless you want to do like... In my iteration, I put Faithful Mending in there. So you could I guess you could tutor up Faithful Mending to be able to flash it back, or maybe other flashback spells, but... Realistically, what you want to do is you want to just get creatures and fill your graveyard with the most hated cards people have ever read. So he's pretty good for doing that. Like an Entomb on a stick, basically. Overcharged Amalgam. It's a zombie. 4 mana for a 3/3. Flying, flash, exploit. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice a creature. If you exploit, you counter target spell, activated ability, creature, or triggered ability. This can stop some problems that might happen, and it gives you the ability to exploit, which also can then trigger Sefris on somebody else's turn. Again, that's the goal of the deck, you know? Phantasmal Image, fantastic. Just being able to copy one of your hated creatures for super, super cheap. And again, Revelark, it abides by the low power, if I'm remembering Revelark correctly. We'll get to Revelark eventually. Plaguecrafter, 3 mana for a 3/2. When he enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, and then each player who can't, they discard a card. This is pretty good because it, again, gives you a sack outlet for either one of your creatures that you want to sack or himself. And it also is removal for anybody that plays light creatures, so they only have one. It's removal for all of those. Next up, Priest of Felrites. Insane card. Really, really good. Double removal. It's fantastic. So it's just a white-black, 2/2. Pay 3 life, sacrifice Priest of Felrites. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. The activate only as a sorcery does kind of suck, but I think it'd be probably too strong if it didn't have that, being able to like block and reanimate, or just being able to reanimate at instant speed. I get it. I get that it's, you know, the sorcery things, I normally am like, ugh, it's annoying, but I kind of understand it with this one. And then it also has Unearth, which means you can pay 5, return this card from the graveyard, it gains haste, and then you exile it if at the next end step, or if it would leave the battlefield. So the idea is to just, you know, unearth it and then sacrifice it right away and then reanimate something. Pretty good. Double Reanimator. Radiant Solar. Very strong card. I actually didn't initially play it correctly, but I'll get through that. So 6 mana for a 3/6. Flying lifelink. Whenever Radiant Solar or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, venture into the dungeon. Very strong. And the really cool thing about her is... Or him? Her? I don't know. Really cool about it. The angel? Anyways, the really cool thing about Radiant Solar is you can pay a white mana, discard Radiant Solar, and venture into the dungeon, and you gain a life. You gain 3 life. So you're gaining life, which is kind of needed because, you know, you're going to be a target, so people are going to be attacking you. But what it is it triggers 2 triggers for Sefris because it's a creature hitting the graveyard and it ventures itself. So there's a very good, very real chance that you could discard it, go venture into a dungeon, complete a dungeon, get Radiant Solar onto the battlefield, but then trigger it again for Radiant Solar entering the battlefield. You see what I'm saying? Like Radiant Solar is very strong. Initially, I just played it. I didn't discard. I saw discard, and for some reason, I just didn't think. I didn't continue reading. I don't know. Reading the cards are hard. Revelark, the card I've been talking about. Hopefully, it does what I said it does. So it's 5 mana for a 4/3 flying creature, elemental. When Revelark leaves the battlefield, return up to 2 creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Exactly what I said is nice. Then it has Evoke. You may cast a spell for its Evoke cost. If you do, sacrifice. It's sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. So again, you can pay it for its Evoke cost, sacrifice it immediately, get a trigger from Sefris, and then get 2 things back from the graveyard to then be cheaper. Like 2 or less, you know, the Priest of Felrites or Phantasmal Image, all the cards I've been mentioning up to this point. Shriek Maul, it has an Evoke cost, so it's basically just a 2 mana removal, but again, it also triggers Sefris, which is nice, and it just kills 5 mana for a 3/2 Fear, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature, and has the Evoke cost, which you almost always pay, just because it's value. Solemn Simulacrum, just good value when he dies. I wish he had a sack outlet of some sort in here for Solemn, but it's mana fixing. It's probably one of those things where I'd remove. I haven't removed it yet, but I do see the value. I might actually remove it before this next week. We'll see. Maybe I'll add in like a Commander Sphere or something. It's just, you know, I can see it going away. It's not that big a deal, but it is a good card. Sun Titan! Sun Titan is amazing because of all the things that hit the graveyard. We can reanimate. And there's tons of things that are in there that are 3 or less. We've already mentioned a few of them: Priest of Felrites and Phantasmal Image and all those kind of things. And yeah, sometimes it's just good for reanimation, so why not add him in? And he's cheap, 42 cents. A lot of these cards also, you got to remember, this is through a budget, so a lot of the cards, there might be better versions, but these are going to be what's best for $100 as far as we can put together. Sunblast Angel. 6 mana for a 4/5 flying. When some Blessed Angel enters the battlefield, destroy all tapped creatures. Pretty good. We need some removal. And if we do it on our turn, we don't have, none of our stuff's going to be tapped, so it's just going to destroy everybody else's stuff. Perfect. Sir Conrad the Grim, he probably needs no introduction because plenty of people have probably already lost to him. But Sir Conrad the Grim, he is a 5/4 for 5. Whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then you can have people mill, which is good because we want to mill. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here. We're milling cards, we're filling our graveyard with stuff, we're triggering Sefris on other people's turns, we're making them take damage. Sir Conrad's fantastic. Thought Courier, draw ditch. Viscera Seer, sacrifice outlet. So there is 1 sacrifice outlet for that Solemn, but the odds of having a Viscera Seer are fairly low, so you can't really always depend on it. But yeah, sacrifice outlet to Scry. Wall of Omens. It's just to draw a card mainly and have like a defender so you kind of survive a little longer, but this got removed in my rendition, the second week version. Yanti Malison. 2 mana for a 2/1, and it can't be blocked as long as it's attacking alone. Whenever Yanti Malison deals combat damage to a player, enter into the dungeon. So, you know, you attack for the lone, it's unblockable, and get some free triggers. Pretty good. Buried Alive. Search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, then shuffle. If this were instant, it would be fantastic, but unfortunately it's not. However, it is a good, fairly cheap way to fill your graveyard with some hateful creatures. It's a tutor, kind of like an Entomb ability. And more cards like this is good because it, like, again, triggers Sefris, just putting creatures into the graveyard, and then eventually you'll be able to reanimate those creatures. So you're to kind of like toolbox and tutor your own stuff. Dismantling Wave is hilarious, by the way. I've actually cycled it 2 times now. In both weeks, I've cycled it. It's pretty insane when it's 8 mana, but oh man, the first week it hit for like 20 different things. The second week it was like 15. It hits a lot. It's pretty good. So 3 mana for each opponent. Destroy up to 1 target creature. Destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls. And you can cycle it. When you cycle Dismantling Wave, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. It is pretty good. I mean, it does include your own stuff, so it's not all great, but, I mean, if you got that Solemn on the battlefield, you want them destroyed anyways, so, you know, I guess that's good. But that's why the deck doesn't really run that many mana rocks or anything, because it would kind of be a little disheartening to destroy all your own stuff. But fighting against an Osgear deck, like I did last week, this thing destroyed quite a lot. It was great. Living Death, 5 mana. Each player exiles all creature cards from his or her graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures he or she controls, then puts all cards he or she exiled this way onto the battlefield. Because we are playing a Reanimator deck, there's a very good chance that we'll have better creatures than everybody else. So getting rid of what's on the board currently and then putting everything from our graveyard onto the battlefield most likely will almost always be better than what they do. But I haven't played this yet, so I don't 100% know. But if worse comes to worse, I mean, you have removal, like the Archfiend of Ifnir for just cycling things and just killing their creatures afterwards. So most likely this is just going to be great. Necromantic Selection, 7 mana. A lot, but destroy all creatures, then return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. It's a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Exile Necromantic Selection. This is a very nice board wipe to then just be able to get, you know, the best thing that died. A little hard to do on spell table because you have to like kind of pay attention to everything that died and then like know what's, you know, the woes of electronic, but you know, it still works pretty well. And it's 18 cents, so very cheap. Unburial Rites, very fantastic Reanimator card. 5 mana, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then it has flashback for cheaper, and then you may cast it from your graveyard for its flashback cost and then exile it. So double reanimate card, fantastic. Unmarked Grave, another one of those cards that is just a tutor to put something in your graveyard, and it's cheap, $1.68. Search your library for a non-legendary card. It can be a spell, but again, I don't know. I guess you could tutor for Unburial Rites and then reanimate something. So yeah, it could be a creature, or it could be a spell. A little bit of flexibility. But you put that card into your graveyard and then you shuffle. So kind of a cheap little tutor for some cards, or a way to trigger Sefris and then a good target to reanimate later on. Victimize, 3 mana. As a sorcery, choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature card. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. Now, the first week I played this card, I initially was going to take it out because when I played it, I mean, I knew that they were going to come into play tapped, but it just, I don't know, it made me lose the game because I had no blockers, which kind of sucked. I didn't think the tapped would matter that much, and maybe it wouldn't have had I had, like, you know, Cataclysmic Gyrdhulk in the graveyard, which I could have done. So I think that was a misplay on my own part, so I think it's still worth playing for sure, especially at 26 cents, a double Reanimator. It's a fairly good card. Spark, this is just a removal card, instant speed, 2 mana. Exile, target permanent with mana value 4 or greater. Exile is an important thing to have, and it's any permanent with mana value 4 or greater, which is nice. Most of the big threats are going to be 4 or greater, so nice to have something that's instant speed that can remove anything 4 or greater. Eerie Interlude, 3 mana instant. Exile any number of target creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So this can get yourself around board wipes. This can get yourself around... this can give you some value on enter the battlefield triggers. So overall, for only $1.61 at instant speed, Eerie Interlude is pretty good. Forbidden Alchemy is a fantastic card. 3 mana, instant speed, which is nice. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. You fill your graveyard, you get that land you need or that Reanimator spell or whatever. You trigger Sefris with whatever you discard. Most likely it's going to be a creature because it's pretty creature heavy. And that has flashback for 7, but again, it's instant speed and it does what the deck wants you to do, so it's fantastic. Miscast is just a counter spell. Counter target instant or sorcery spell for 1 blue, unless they pay 3. Spell Pierce, it's another instant blue mana. Counter target non-creature spell, unless its controller pays 2. Swords of the Plowshare, fantastic removal. Everybody knows Swords of the Plowshare. Exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power for 1 white. You've got Utter End. Utter End is 4 mana for instant speed to exile target non-land permanent. Anything, which is great. And it's exile, which is great. Arcane Cigna is a mana rock. Key to the City. This one's pretty good because it's a discard outlet for Archfiend of Ifnir or to trigger Sefris. And then it also can be a draw engine to pay 2 to be able to draw at the beginning of your turn when you untap. There's no real untap shenanigans besides just untapping for your turn, so it's more just about having a discard outlet because of other things that like discard, like Sefris or Archfiend or, you know, all kinds of other stuff. Lightning Greaves is just a way to give yourself protection, give your either commander protection so it doesn't get removed, which honestly, surprisingly enough, a lot of people, I don't think they understand how much value you get from completing dungeons with Sefris. Both weeks, I've had Sefris stick onto the battlefield for way too long. People just let it go, man. They just, like, oh, look at him. Look at how cute. He just ventured through the dungeon. But then just, you get so much value. People just, I don't know. We'll see if that continues to be the case. But at the moment, I've won 1 game, and I think I did 2nd or 3rd in the other game. So not too bad, but in decent spot so far. Soul Ring, Mana Rock. Wayfarer's Bauble, it's just mana fixing. So you pay 1 mana and you can search your library for a basic land card put into play tapped. You can get it back with like Sun Titan. So there's a little bit of recursion for Wayfarer's Bauble, but I end up removing it for the 2nd week. Minimus Containment. There's actually a better card to play. I think it's called Imprisoned by the Moon or something like that. It's something about the moon. Basically, it's better because this allows them to, if you put this on like a commander, it gives them a treasure to sacrifice their commander, then they can just recast their commander. But Imprisoned by the Moon, I think is what it's called. It's just a better version of that. It makes it so that just they lose all abilities and they're just like they tap for colorless mana. It's pretty great. Propaganda, I would replace with Ghostly Prison. It's cheaper if you're going for budget-wise, but it's the same thing. 3 mana enchantment. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 colors for each creature he or she controls that's attacking you. This thing's pretty nice because it deters people from attacking you. And I've had this happen with the first week. There was many times where like, oh, I don't have the mana to attack you, or I don't want to pay the mana. So it's pretty nice. You've got Thorough Investigation, which is a much better card than I first anticipated, but with playing with it, it's very strong. It's a 3-mana enchantment. Whenever you attack, investigate. You get to create a clue that you pay 2 mana, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. So it gives you a little bit of draw value. However, whenever you sacrifice a clue, you get to venture into the dungeon. It's just very good value. Being able, I mean, you'll most likely be able to attack with any of your stuff, either whether it's the unblockable thing, the Mollison, or whatever you have, a flyer or whatever. You're going to be able to create some clues, and then just being able to venture to dungeons. It's just value. It's great. Tortured Existence. This is basically just a discard outlet, but it allows you to kind of like cycle through. You could like plain cycle the Eternal Dragon, and then discard a different card on somebody else's turn to then trigger Sefris, get the Eternal Dragon back, and then plain cycle the Eternal Dragon again. That's, you know, pretty good value. And yeah, for 1 black enchantment and then 1 black to use the ability, it's pretty solid. Now we're going to get into the lands. So lands are pretty cheap. We didn't really want to spend a lot of the mana base, a lot of money in the mana base. So tapped mana, just taps for Esper. All the bounce lands, so the Azorius, the Cave of Koilos is just a nice cheap, only 50 cents. And if you need the colored mana, you can get there. Otherwise, just use the colorless and save yourself from taking some life. Choked Estuary. This one's just nice because there actually does play a lot of swamp. It plays a lot of basics. There's like 15 to 20, somewhere around there. Next up, Clearwater Pathway. A little expensive, but it's nice just to have the flexibility. But I could see this being taken out if you wanted to get some either more expensive cards in the main deck and just replace this with like an island or something. This one's not too required, but it is nice to have the flexibility. Command Tower, staple, you know, taps for any color. Darkwater Catacombs. This one's actually really nice because it takes only a colorless to tap, and you get black and blue. Pretty kite, and it's cheap, only 25 cents. Like I said, bounce land. Esper Panorama. This one's nice because it taps for colorless. Doesn't come into play tapped. It allows you to get your island or swamp card to the battlefield tapped. Only 1 colorless. Very cheap, very nice. Evolving Wilds, just for mana fixing. Exotic Orchard, another cheap land that almost always will give you 1 of the colors you need. This Reach Sanitarium, legendary land, taps for colorless, and each player draws a card, discards a card. Now, you might think this is bad because you're giving your opponents value, but you're more concerned, especially in a budget version, you're more concerned about draw ditching on somebody else's turn to trigger for your dungeon delving or your Sefris. So you don't really care too much, and sometimes the opponent only has 1 card in their hand. You're actually ditching the only card they have, and if they need that card, it's real bad for them. I've had this happen. They did not like that. And they got like a land and replaced. So there's, you know, you might be helping your opponent with this, but if you do it at the end of the last person's turn, just before you start your turn, you know, less chance of getting the most value out of it. I think it's very good card, actually. Place of Fortress, just mana fixing. High Market. This is a sack outlet, which is required, I think. It does only tap for colorless, but it doesn't come into play tapped, and you gain a life. You know, sack the Solemn and trigger Sefris, get your draw card, you know, get a creature that you need into the graveyard to be able to reanimate it to get the end of the battlefield effect. Tons of value. Sacrifice a creature if it gets, you know, they go to try to remove it, you can sack it in response to, like, maybe they try to exile, like, Ashen Rider, and you don't get the trigger from him dying, and you won't be able to reanimate him anymore. So being able to sacrifice in response to even that kind of removal is very important to have. Island. Basic land. Isolated Chapel, dual land, nothing important there. Another bounce land. Plains. It runs those. Port Town. These lands are pretty cool, but I mean they're super cheap. However, because this deck does run a decent number of plains and whatnot, it's probably plains and islands. It's probably not going to come into play tapped too often, but when I've played it, it has every time. But it most likely won't, but it still can happen. So it's a nice, very cheap dual land that might not come into play tapped. Prairie Stream is really, really good because, like I said, you are running enough basic lands that you can run stuff like this, and for 24 cents, it's a very nice dual land. Sunken Hollow, same thing. And it is also tutorable. Swamp. It runs those. Paramorphic Expanse for mana fixing. Vault of Champions, dual land. Very cheap, only $5. It's almost always going to come into play untapped. As far as the dungeons are concerned, we'll go through the dungeons here. So Dungeon of the Mad Mage. This one, I don't go through too often because it's kind of big to go through. Like, there's a lot of different rooms. There is good value in there. Like, you get to gain a life, scry, get a treasure token. Those are all like the good ones. Scry 2 is great. Exiling the top 2 cards to be able to look through, to be able to play them that turn. Maybe you hit a land, maybe you hit whatever. The fact that you can play them is nice. And then Scry 3 is great. And then draw 3 cards, reveal them. You can cast one of them for free. I mean, those are all great things. So it's probably one of the best ones that you want to go through if you're looking for value, to just kind of try and scry and dig. And if you have an engine, like if you have a draw ditch engine or you have multiple and you can blow through a dungeon quickly, I would run this one. However, if you don't, this one here, Lost Mines of Fendelver, this one only takes 4 to go through, and it doesn't have any negative effects on it. Basically, you just scry 1, create a treasure token. You could create the 1/1 as a blocker, not too great, but creating a treasure token is great. And each opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. Not too relevant, but it could be. Our creature gets a -4, -0 until the end of your next turn. Not that great, and the counter is not that great, but drawing a card is great. So this one, I don't really go through too often. If ever. I haven't yet run through this one. It's not that great. But the best one so far, in my opinion, is this one here. The Tomb of Annihilation. I just realized the camera froze. Well, act like I'm son of a gun. Anyways, Tomb of Annihilation is great. Each player loses 1 life. That's not great, but not the worst. Veil of Fears. Each player loses 2 life unless they discard a card. The great thing about this is that a lot of people take the damage, and it adds up over time. And if they don't take the damage, then they have to discard a card. So it's good things either way. And you want to discard cards because a lot of your deck cares about discarding cards. But a lot of the times, and if you don't have anything to discard, you just pay the 2 life. No big deal. So you're going to get a ton of value. Most of the time, you're going to get way more value out of it than your opponents, which is fantastic. That's the idea, you know? The second one is each player loses 2 life unless they sacrifice an artifact, a creature, or a land. Well, we need a sacrifice outlet. So like I said before, for Solemn, being able to sacrifice a creature, that's good. So a lot of things you do want to have a sacrifice outlet to trigger Sefris. This is one of them. And then the last one is you get a 4/4 legendary 4/4 creature horror with Death Touch. Nice thing about that is it's got Death Touch, so it's a great blocker, or it's a decent attacker, and this is a short dungeon to go through. With it only being 4 different things to go through, you can complete it fairly quickly. I haven't ever went through the Obelet. It's kind of expensive. Discard a card, and you have to sacrifice an artifact, a creature, and a land. It's quite a lot to go to sacrifice, and yeah, it gets you through the dungeon quicker. But oof, I don't know that it's that worth it unless you really need to sack those things. Maybe you can sack a Solemn, sack another creature you want to sack, and then sack a land, and you have to discard a card. I don't know. It's so many things. I almost always go to the left side. I'm back. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments below. Make sure to like the video, share it with your friends. Hope you guys like these kind of like deck tech things. I think they're fun. I enjoy them quite a lot. The first week that I played this deck, I didn't really know how to play it too much, so I actually ended up making a few misplays, which cost me the game. I think I finished in, I want to say 3rd, so not great out of 4 people. But the second week I did win. Now that I've added a little bit more to it, so the next video, keep an eye out for that. That's going to be an update on the actual deck itself and what I've done to it. I've actually changed it quite a bit, and then there's going to be a follow-up to that as well, because we're actually on week 3 next week for the league in the Jake and Joel Magic's league. And if you guys are interested in joining the league, it is open to anybody that can play and make it for those days. It's basically once a week. You get each month has a different theme. This month was you pick any commander from Adventures of Zendikar and upwards, and any legendary creature within the precons, and you were able to play those. Next month, I think it's supposed to be Kamigawa. Anything within any of the Kamigawa block, including the new one. That's interesting. There's a few different cool commanders I'm thinking about doing. I might do a fun deck. Probably not designed to win at all, but it might just be really, really fun. So anyways, thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed, and see you next time.